Good morning. This is the House of Transportation. We're back from our morning break and we're gonna continue our discussion with DMV. So feel free to pick up where you left off.
Perfect. I believe we started talking about advisory. There was maybe going to be some questions about this. I don't know if you want me to touch on what I thought the questions were going to be or just keep moving on.
I'm not sure who had the questions,
Yeah.
I think
but
the issue was, like, I
Yeah.
just brought up the point that we had talked about before, is that there are things that will pass inspection, but you're still not legal.
Right, and allowing,
That's
yeah,
a sort of a weird thing.
And you provided an advisory of that.
Yeah,
correct. Yeah, and I would just say what we talked about a little bit, our stance on it is that these are inspection mechanics with no law enforcement training at all. And if it's not in the manual, I don't think we can ever ask them, to really step in at all and say, hey, this is against the law, you can't leave, and we were talking about it kind of.
arrested.
Right. It goes back to that, what I would say kind of like that affordability point of the inspection is we don't want people being worried about bringing their car in for a safety inspection that they might either like get a ticket, which is then going to, be hundreds more dollars on top of whatever they might owe. We want them to go and get this safety inspection to make sure that their car is safe to be driving on the roads for them and everybody else around. So if we start telling them like, don't let people leave, if this, that, or the other thing, we're going to be basically forcing people to spend more money. And I think it's just kind of a slippery slope.
I appreciate what DMV has done over the years to make that distinction between
Yeah.
what's really necessary and what's not in terms of people's pocketbooks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Representative Hood.
A question and a comment. Question, so a car that has a rear plate that is illegible because it's so faded, would that still pass inspection? But it would be
But it would be an
Did you get it?
advisory item,
you get an advisory notice, okay.
but it does,
But
there
it does
is a
pass
law
because
that
it's not a
says,
safety issue.
right, but there is a law that says if your plate is faded, whatever, that you could be stopped and ticketed for that.
Right, okay.
That isn't.
And then it sounds like you all have already done some great work looking at the inspection process and thinking about affordability and what is essential. We've had a couple bills sitting on the wall introduced to kind of further the discussion about what is necessary versus what is just nice. So I'm just looking at an email from a constituent as well, talking about the brake rust requirement being way too strict. So I guess my question is, are you open to continuing to look at some of these issues that Vermonters are saying are still kind of an affordability
Yeah.
issue in the inspection?
Yeah, and we
process?
talked as a team, we think what's in the manual right now is there for a reason and it's for safety. But I think we're open to talking about it. And we actually, if we have time later, we actually brought a brake rotor and we can kind of show you,
Okay,
this is the rust we're talking about. And there's also like 3 more slides about brake rust because we get those same brake rust questions all the time. And they're actually things that we're talking with mechanics like almost daily about
okay.
because. Yeah, and mechanics are saying,
Yeah,
No,
so
Representative.
we had to change the rules last
Yeah.
year to, it's superficial.
Yeah.
You pass, if not, and people with hybrids or electric cars don't really use their brakes because they have regenerative braking. And, our cars for years had continued to fail the rust.
Mhm.
And last year, my mechanic, I went in there for inspection and he says, you gotta be hitting those brakes once in a while and get that rust off, but you pass because the new criteria
yeah.
is really only looking for a safety issue with the rust.
Yeah, we sent it out, I think, late last year, and then again in March of this year, we sent out another thing. We can send things to that tablet, so every mechanic will see it. It'll go to every email that's signed up in that AVIP portal, like the dealerships. And it says like, hey, this is what we're hearing. We want to just, again, tell you, this is what we defined rusted as. Here's an example of a failure. Here's an example of something that maybe when it comes in, looks like it might fail. But if you just do this, that, and the other thing, it shouldn't fail. So, and I have that slide of that memo, few slides from it, so
Feel free to.
move on. So just wanted to show quickly, this is what, a vehicle inspection report looks like. This is done after every inspection, pass or fail. Inspection stations are not required to give this to you, but they are required to give it to you if you asked for it. Some stations might just staple this right to their thing. Some might only give it to you if asked for it, because then they'd be printing, tons of paper every day if they had to do a 3-page thing on every single car they do. But this is available if anyone ever wants it. It's also available, like I said, on that public AVIP portal, where you could go look at this for your vehicle or other vehicles. The first page on here, so this one is going to be all the safety items. So it's going to talk about wheels, tires, steering, brakes, lighting. The second one is the emissions test, so the OBD2 inspection. And then the third one, which is another reason we think inspections are important, is that any recalls on your vehicle will show up on this third page. So if you had a recall and you didn't even know it, just plugging the tablet into your computer, it's going to spit out that, there's this many recalls for this reason. Contact your dealer for more information. And you can see this one on the first page there has this is actually an advisory for window tint. So that's what it looks like. So the vehicle glazing section or window section, it'll say, driver, passenger, front window have aftermarket tint. These windows may be in violation of this law. But you can see that up above it says that it's a pass. So it's an advisory item letting them know when they leave, you may be in violation of state law. So I'll start to move on a little bit and talk. We're going to start getting into some of these rust conversations. But I just wanted to quickly show the types of frames that we're working on. The traditional body-on frame was, a very solid metal frame with a body put on top of it. Mostly nowadays, it's used in trucks and some SUVs. It's thick gauge steel, and it was designed to absorb high amounts of energy. So instead of the entire vehicle designed to absorb energy, let's say in a crash or going off-roading, right? They made this really solid, heavy frame, and that was supposed to absorb most of that energy. Someone, very smart came up with the unibody design. So most modern cars, almost all cars we see nowadays are going to have a unibody design. So the frame and body are actually one piece. So it's almost like a safety pod. And what's that's meant to make the passenger compartment as safe as possible. And then all those other zones around it are built basically to crumple in a certain way in the event of a collision, whether it's from the front, the side, the back. And they just wanted to make the passenger compartment remain intact as much as possible and dissipate all the other energy throughout the car rather than just relying on that one steel frame. The steel frame is just a big benefit for it's heavy, it's solid, it can tow a lot more. So that's why you'll see it in big trucks. You'll always see like a big steel frame. They could design a unibody. So some trucks are like the Honda Ridgeline. If you've seen that type of truck, that's a unibody frame. It can still tow and, plow or whatever you want to do. It's just not going to be the same as like a 2500 Chevy truck that's huge and has this heavy frame. The main reasons too is lighter vehicle, the unibody, much lighter, saves on gas. So your fuel efficiency, the safety aspect of it. So that's why most of the cars are moving towards that type of frame. And the reason I bring that up, because like I said, there is a bunch of we deal with a lot of rust issues. So the frame is always a question. And this just tells us, this just talks about just frame components. So any area of the frame or any area connecting one side to the other, basically, if it exhibits corrosion, which breaks the integrity of the metal by passing through a component or causes cracks, breaks, tears, or any broken manufactured welds is missing, it'll be a rejection of that vehicle for inspection. Items such as duct tape, foam spray, insulation, other materials are not accepted. And then I'll show you the
Gorilla tape?
So yeah, not for the frame, maybe some other portions of the car you could get away with some Gorilla tape, but for the frame and the components of the vehicle that we're hoping are going to operate as manufacturer designed in a crash, we want them to be as solid as possible. And moving off from the frame, so when we talk about rocker panels, I assume that's probably another one that people have heard. People talking about is rocker panel rust. And the reason we talk a lot about rocker panel rust and the reason that we believe it should remain a failure is because we've moved to these unibody designs so much that if you look, the green portion of this car is going to be the rocker panel. If that's rusted and if that has a hole passing through it, which the failure criteria is not just any rust, like a lot of them have plastic pieces over, and nowadays you'll see plastic on all parts of the car. The plastic can be destroyed. It's what's underneath. If there's a hole going through it, it's really going to make the vehicle not perform as intended by the manufacturer during all their crash testing because of these unibody design. The rocker panel and every part of this car, right, is designed in a crash from whichever direction to crumple in a certain way. If there's a piece of rust, let's say in a rocker panel on the side, and you get hit from the side from another vehicle, that rocker panel is not going to do as intended and keep those passengers safe. So that's why we've really been, looking at vehicles closely when someone calls us about a rust issue, right? So a rust in like you'll see a lot in the fender wells, right? So a little hole up above the wheel fender, right? You could put certain types of tape over that to pass inspection because that is not part of like the structural part of the undercarriage, right? So it's not designed to crumple a certain way. But we're really focusing on the parts that like we want people to be safe. Again, this is a safety inspection. So we believe that rust to those areas really compromises that safety. I mean, if you've ever watched a crash test dummy video, right? Like every inch of that car is meant to do something during that crash, right? And if it's not, close to manufacturer specs, it's not going to do what it's intended to do. So we get worried about that. So I don't know if there's questions on that specifically on the rockers, so I can move on to the brake rust. This is just an example of something you wouldn't necessarily see from the outside of this vehicle, talking about rust. This was actually an investigation that DMV did a few years ago. This person was driving 50 miles an hour down the road. Obviously felt a little something here. Their tire comes off to the side. Luckily, they were able to pull over and stop before there was a crash. Investigation, so we'll go do an investigation of this because someone may call and be like, hey, my vehicle was just inspected. Why is my tire popping off, right? During investigation, we found that the control arm, which actually attaches to your frame and then attaches to your tire, basically is what holds your tires and wheels to the frame of your vehicle, and it articulates as you drive around. So that had completely rusted where it connects to the frame, and I have a picture, I believe. So if you look up in the top corner there, so this is the actual control arm. That piece is supposed to be connected up there. What happened was through rust and then just normal driving, maybe they hit a pothole. I don't know the section, but it broke that part. Wheel pops off another, couple miles, not knowing or, ignoring it. That wheel is going to come probably all the way off. That who knows what's going to happen. It did look like in that picture, there may have been snow on the roads, right? So that person could easily go off the road. And again, and we're talking, I like to think of it a lot too, is we want people that are driving to be safe, but also the general public, right? So if my car is not safe, I'm not just endangering myself, I'm also endangering the other person that they're going to lose all steering and go across and possibly hit somebody else. I think I have one more. So we were able to see what the other side looked like, and small, unassuming hole. If you look right there, it was just touched briefly with a flathead screwdriver, which opened the hole completely, showing, this was going to fail, at some point in the near future. And then the investigator saw that in the back seat of that car, child safety seat. So something that I think, luckily, I don't know if the child was in the car at the time of this, but could have easily been.
So you sort of go back to the ABIT system and sort of match it up to the investigation and see what they checked off?
Yeah, so what would happen here is, sorry, that was slide 22. So what would happen here is let's say this person calls and they have a fresh Vermont inspection sticker on. right? And maybe the police officer says this is weird, or maybe the person says, how is my car falling apart? I'm gonna call DMV, like I just got inspected. So they'll provide us their VIN. We go right to that same public AVIP portal that, like we've said, anyone can go to. We look and see the date and time that it was inspected. We look at the station. If it's something like this is pretty egregious, right, with this amount of rust, so you probably have a broader time. So if this car had been inspected in the last, 6 months, we would still go look into this like pretty heavily, right? Because this is something that didn't happen, even with how rough Vermont winters are. Like this didn't happen in a couple weeks or a month or two, right? This would have been, looming for quite some time. So then what we're going to do is we're going to assign one of our investigative detectives or one of our civilian investigators to go out, and two ways. Usually what we try to do is get this person that had the bad vehicle, and we meet up with them and do an examination, whether it's, if it's something we can do on the side of the road or at a parking ride, we will. Otherwise, we partner with a bunch of, mechanic shops that'll let us come and bring a vehicle and put it up on a lift. There's a couple, like in the Chittenden County area, there's at least one that's like a known expert mechanic, and he testifies at court. So he'll let us bring the car over there, and then we'll do the examination with him, right? And he'll be able to say like, through my experience, 100% that would have been there, 2 months ago or whatever. We'll do the investigation, we'll take pictures, and then we go address it with the inspection station. And then kind of like a speeding ticket, there most likely is going to be, the investigator is going to decide, is this something that's, should they get a warning for this? Should they get an administrative penalty for this? A certain amount of administrative penalties could get you suspended. There's obviously a financial cost to a penalty. We look into a lot of things like, has this station been having a lot of issues? Has this individual mechanic, and we do have the option to write those penalties to the station or to the mechanic. So if it's something that, has been being passed by a bunch of different mechanics, we may write the station a penalty, right? Because there's obviously no supervision, right? Start at the top. If it's something where, hey, every time this person inspects a car and I get a call about it, it's egregious, right? So I'm going to deal directly with the inspection mechanic.
Yeah. Is there any enforcement from the aspect of making the person that did the inspection pay for the thing that broke? Even though they're not technically, wasn't their fault, but
Yeah.
their lack of judgment could have led to something more
Right.
serious?
So
Or
we
no?
we don't have anything with that directly. I will say we do sometimes, do the examination, have the person contact the inspection station and say, hey, I've had that before where I've gone to the inspection station. I've said, look, this was pretty egregious. There's no reason you guys should have missed this, right? And they kind of admitted fault, and then they worked directly with the customer and got the vehicle fixed because they didn't do anything to damage the vehicle.
Yeah.
So, but they did miss it, which could have caused. So we don't necessarily, there's nothing we have that will force. a
That's outside of
mechanic
your
to-
purview.
Yeah,
You
it-
could just take,
Yeah.
suspend the license or revoke.
right. And I mean, sometimes even on the initial call, we'll say, have you talked to the station yet about it? Because if they want to make a civil agreement that, they're gonna fix this or fix that, we kind of allow that process to take place, and then we do our investigation. I would say we don't ever say, oh, you were made whole, like we're done, because that would, possibly breed still that mechanic thinking, oh, I can just get away with it and just pay it off, so we still do the investigation, but we might maybe it is their first time, and maybe we give them a warning, because we have progressive discipline that we like to talk about, like first warning, then a penalty. And if they're willing to work with people, it's easier to give someone a
Sure,
warning.
sure. Since this case has been in place, has there been any suspensions or revoked of licenses?
For this,
For inspections?
Oh, yeah.
In general?
oh, yeah.
Since we had this system, because it's morally, I
Yeah.
guess makes people on the up and up.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say we're probably looking at right now, like, so just, there's other penalties involved than just like what I would call this is a faulty inspection, right? But
Yeah.
there's also like, if I walk into an inspection station and say, hey, I want to look at your records, and they say no, like, well, they don't have a choice. This is a regulatory thing, right? We
Yeah.
could penalize them for that. We could penalize them for technically not having the proper signage on their building, stuff like that. So those regulatory things, I will say probably, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, but penalties issued are probably, I mean, a handful a month, probably.
Hmm.
I don't know if anybody else wants to be a handful of penalties a month, you think?
There are business partners.
Right,
We have 1,100 business partners.
Yeah.
on Inspection stations. We want them to succeed.
right.
We also want to protect the consumer. 99% of the time, we have a conversation with them, we educate them, we move on. They continue business, do a good job,
Mhm.
and the consumer may home. That's generally our goal, is to have them be good partners. It's not to penalize them, it's not to close them. It's to bring them in line to follow the manual, do things properly and protect the consumer.
And I would say probably on that fact, 99.9% of the time, if I walk into a station and say, hey, you don't have, like one of the things is your hours posted anywhere. They're like, okay, we're gonna do that right now, right? Like, and they do it right then and there. Like, you're not getting a lot of pushback, like the captain's saying, or we're partners with these people. And if we just walk in and start finding them, it's a slippery slope. And
Yeah, no, I was just
Yeah.
wondering the effectiveness
Yeah.
of this new, that.
Yeah.
There was heartburn when we first did this, especially
Yeah.
smaller dealer inspection stations.
Yeah.
Closed. and,
Yeah.
I just remember the heartburn, but this is, as bare fruits in a sense
Oh,
of,
it definitely, yeah. And even if we're not necessarily like putting penalties on people, it definitely holds them more accountable and they know it. Because they know as soon as they enter in that tablet,
Yeah.
that's going to a place that I can see, you guys can see, the public can see. So it definitely holds them more accountable. And I think you're definitely seeing a much higher rate of better inspections because of that.
You all seen our stats. We're not going through 550,000 inspections every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So it's we're correct.
Yeah. I'll move on to the brake rust now. So I'm back to the brake. So on the old inspection manual, it was just rust or cracks exist on the drum contact surface. It was very, open to interpretation, but so we wanted to clear it up a little bit. So on the new manual, like in that 2019 manual, if it was changed to, if more than half an inch of rust cumulative per braking surface exists on any contact surface of the rotor and drum. Okay, and then we also defined rust. Rust is defined as any swelling, delamination, or pitting. So that surface rust that we talked about earlier is not grounds for rejection. We make sure to tell everybody that. And honestly, the first part of every inspection they should be test driving your vehicle, right? So hopefully you drove your vehicle at least a couple miles to get there, right? And you burned some rust off. They're supposed to get in it, drive it. They should have a certain route, certain speeds they need to hit, and they should be hitting the brakes, on your vehicle. Most of that rust is going to just pop right off. Granted, if the car's been sitting for months in the state of Vermont, there's a chance it won't, or it's starting to actually like eat away at the metal of the rotor. You're going to get that more delamination or that pitting that we see. We do have an example if we want to bring that out now, or do you want to wait for later and kind of walk that around as if there's any questions or as I move on to the next one?
People tend to like visuals. We'll put on a pair of gloves, these things aren't neat, I look pretty.
There's a rotor in there. There's a rusted rotor in there. Yeah. It's a good visual, and if you go to the next slide, I can show you so this is what we sent out in March 6th of 2025. I think we've sent it out. I think that was the second time we sent it out, or was that the first? Okay, that was the second time we sent it out. And you can kind of see here where if you look at this top wheel and tire there, that's what surface rust is. So if I just look on the outside of someone's car right now, it's gonna look
Okay.
copper, brown, gunky. After just a short time of driving and hard braking, it's gonna then polish it back off because the rotor is contacting that whole area. And as you put heat to that area, it's just burning that rust right off. So it gets to that. And that's what we really were telling people, like, this is not a failure if it's just surface rust, right? Because the rotor is still gonna the pad's still gonna contact that rotor and give us a good stopping ability. I mean, really, that's what we want. We want the pad to contact as much of the rotor as possible. We've slimmed it down to a half an inch of rust, which you can imagine if you think about it, a half an inch of rust is taking away a half inch of that rotor. We want 100%, right? Because that's going to give us the most stopping power. But we say a half an inch, it's going to reduce the braking a little bit, but you're still going to be able to stop your car. But the closer and more you get over that half inch, you're really in an emergency situation, which is another thing that we like to pass on to people is like, I can drive my car all day. I only live a mile from work, But what happens, they're all of a sudden going 40 miles an hour and a person steps out in front of them, they need to slam on their brakes and they need to stop in that time, right? Are they going to be able to stop? We like to plan and have this as kind of like the emergency situation, right? Not just the person that's like, well, I only drive a mile every day. I never go over 25 miles an hour. It's like that person maybe would be okay, but in the event of an emergency, they're not going to be able to stop in time.
So the previous manual, like we discussed before, the old manual, it just said surface rust. And we didn't think we needed to spell that out with surface rust, but apparently we did. That caused a lot of confusion. But in a reminder, every time you change the manual, some inspection mechanic is going to quote an old manual, 3 years manual. So we tried to pick a language that cleared. We didn't have a definition of rust before. So rust is condition of swelling, delamination, and pitting. This is surface rust. I'll give you an example. This is my car, my truck. I live in Williston, right? It's a Dunkin' Donuts 1 mile from my house. I took this picture at Dunkin' Donuts. That's just simply the pad hitting the rotor, normal use. That's a weekend where it rained. Monday morning, I went to work, grabbed my cup of coffee. Okay. Now, if this car didn't sit for a weekend, it sat for 3 months. That swelling is no longer going to be surface rust. It's going to start to swell. It's going to delaminate. It's going to pit, and it's going to go. So you could have a brand new car that could sit in a parking lot at a dealership for a year that sits at a foot of snow in a Vermont winter that has salt dumped on it, could possibly fail inspection because that rust is sat there for a year because that thing hasn't moved. You talk about electric vehicles, absolutely true. Degenerative braking, you don't use the brakes. Because you don't use the brakes, you're not rubbing off that surface rust. You're not cleaning your rotor. You're letting your rotor sit there and just let that rust eat it like a cancer. It just eats away at that metal. So what you see here is an example of a failure. Oh, this is on a truck. So, this is your rotor surface. The 1/2 inch accumulated rust is if you took a measuring tool out and you measured from here to here and from here to here, because that's your braking surface. Okay, and if that comes to a 1/2 inch, it's a failure. This is your brake pad. Brake pad affixes like this. And when that brake pad affixes like that, when you're driving, you go to hit the brakes, it develops friction and it develops heat. And that's what causes your vehicle to stop. It's not going to do that here. And it's not going to do that here. So it's going to do it just from here to here. See how that could be problematic. Now, this is a truck. You got a smaller car, you got a smaller rotor, you got a smaller braking surface. Just in this, a 2-inch rotor, that's 25% of your braking surface is ineffective. And actually, I would argue it's more because if you run your finger over that, it's swollen. So when you take a brake pad and you put that on that brake pad now is elevated in that space and then elevated again here, which means it's even getting less contact here.
It's more leverage on the brake too on the outside, more
Yep.
so than the inside. That's where you're.
So that's why we define rust. If we want to make it clear in this bulletin, you can see the drawing, 1/2 inch cumulative. This is just some examples of pitting, some scarring. Here's how it's measured. Surface rust is not failure. Again, it doesn't matter the age of your car, how many miles. If you leave your car in a garage or out in the driveway and a foot of snow all winter, and then you want to pull it out, you're probably going to have rust. This is Vermont. We have salt. We have bad weather. It's wet. I mean, that's just bottom line, I guess. But if you feel this, you'll see that this is clearly rust. This is not something that if you drive by,
Plus
it's
it's
gonna
bare
come off.
metal.
Right.
Yep, it should be shiny and silver, just like in this picture. Because what happens is this pad will actually brandish to that rotor, which means they wear together. That's what causes that heat and that friction that makes your car stop. Will your car still stop? I hear all the time, my car still stops. When this hits this, will it still stop? Absolutely. But you're in a panic situation, you're on the interstate and somebody stops in front of you dead and you got to slam on your brakes. You might stop at 150 feet versus 100 feet. And that could be the difference of a collision. That's why it's a safety issue. Anybody else want to? Yeah. But you can see how that's raised. That's the swelling. You can feel the pitting, you can feel the scarring. That's not something I can just take off. It used to be in the past, and some of us older guys
Steam
remember
that
this.
time, yeah.
You used to be able to take this rotor and you put it on a lathe basically, and they would actually recondition it. But manufacturers are not making the same manufactured thickness that they once did. So reconditioning these rotors isn't always possible.
Most garages won't even look at that with conditioning, they just want to
Yeah.
buy new rotors.
I think they know of like one or two in the area that still have that,
Yeah.
but
Usually.
it costs more to recondition a rotor now than just to buy a new rotor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you're paying $200 to recondition it, I mean, you can get a pretty decent rotor for $200, so. Yeah.
Any other great questions?
Yeah.
Can you remind, at least me, why it's different on an EV?
So electric vehicles are just made to, they use their electricity to stop the vehicle when you take your foot off of the gas. It's a way to get better gas mileage. It's a way to just make the vehicle last a little longer. So if you take your foot off the gas, it has what's called regenerative braking. So it's electronically and also just, it's starting to.
Turns the motor back.
Right, yeah, so it's starting to slow the vehicle down. So every time you press the brake, you're not getting full brake contact with your rotor because the vehicle's already slowing down on its own. So it's not needing to press as hard. I think initially it was thought like, oh, I won't go through brakes as often, right?
Right.
And that'll make my car last longer. But if you live in Vermont or a state with snow, it's even worse because they're not able to burn off that surface rust. And if you don't burn it off, it will start to turn into that delamination or that pitting.
So if you're an electric car, take it out for a wash and pump brakes.
Yeah.
It's just that anytime you take it out, it's not on the brakes, so it's not.
Okay.
That's it, just drop that rust, so it doesn't sit in the.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have an EV that has the option of one pedal brake,
Okay,
one pedal drive.
okay.
So,
That's it. That's your regenerative brake.
okay, so that's what I
have that
use,
too.
but you can also turn that off, so
Turn it
it
off,
feels more like a
slam your
normal
brakes
car.
once in a while.
Yeah.
So regardless, slam your brakes, or do I have to do it?
Either way,
I still want to, like, I have a work truck and a regular truck, so I don't drive it 24/7. That's, every time I get in my regular truck, it's just been sitting in my yard for one day or two and I start to back out, my brakes start squealing. And I'm like, you know, it's a pretty new truck. I drive down the road, I try and get a little bit of speed, hit the brakes a little bit, and you don't have to slam like, so you're skidding, but you want to give it a good, like, hard stop. And you want to do it enough that it's actually contacting every part of your rotor. So like a quick, just like you're going 10 miles an hour, you just slam on it, it might just get like half the rotor and you'll stop. That's why we say, or if you do any highway driving, then you're probably good, right? Because it's just, you're going fast, you're hitting the brakes, you're passing people. But yeah, any vehicle you want to do it.
What kind of driving do you just encourage us to do?
100 miles an hour.
Within the limits of the law, of course, yes. So that breaks. I think if you want to go to the next slide, 25. Just wanted to quickly touch on the Administrative Procedures Act. That's the process for adopting, you know, new administrative rules or for making changes. It's a long process, approximately 8 months. You have to, you know, apply and file with, you know, the Interagency Committee on Administrative Rules. We have to then make that rule file with the Secretary of State, do public notice, post online, public hearings, comment periods. You get the final ruling, and then the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules will review, and then it'll be adopted by the Secretary of State. It's something that takes about 8 months in our experience with it and with different inspection rules. And we just pop that slide in there just to show that this is, some of these things, we would love if we could change it just, you know, tomorrow, maybe if we came up with a new process, but it's not something that changes just overnight and it just takes a little bit of time, obviously. If you want to go ahead to the next slide, we get a lot of questions about emissions as well. And some people are asking, you know, why do we do this OBD2 sensor testing during every inspection? So the beginning of it is, obviously, we just want to improve the air quality of Vermont. Vehicles are the, you know, #1 producer of pollutants in the air. And so how can we improve that? We can have vehicles that just are running better. Their onboard computer is working properly and doing what it's supposed to. So it's emitting whatever that amount of emissions is. There's also federal law, the Clean Air Act. We're one of 33 states with the ozone transport region. And then, of course, there's EPA regulations. So a lot of times people tell us the OBD2 is not a safety thing. And the reason it was kept in is because, one, it's federal law. We have to do it. We've been doing it since 1999. And as you see there, the testing failure rate in 2017 was about 18%, and today it's down to about 4%. So cars are being improved constantly and making them more, efficient. And then our processes are also improving. So it's something that we do it mainly because we have to, and then also because it also provides a better environment for Vermonters. So if you get questions on, if you go to the next slide, why are we doing these OBD2 tests, which was that second page of the VIR? Well, it's because we have to. On all vehicles that are 1996 or newer vehicles, you have to perform the self-test, emission control, monitor to determine if emission controls are working properly. And really, the only reason that check engine light's going to come on in your vehicle is if something's wrong with your onboard diagnostics. It's not going to come on. Some people may think, oh, my brakes are going bad, so my check engine light came on, right? That'd be great. But I don't think we have the technology yet for that. But the only reason that that's coming on is because there's something wrong with your emissions. And that's why we do this test. You can see the legislative change on July 1, starting from the current calendar year, vehicles 16 model years and old or less, and with a gross vehicle weight of 8,500 pounds or less, must be tested for OBD. So we get a lot of questions on it. We understand it might not always be a safety issue, but it is something that we're just required to do. I'll go to the next one. Again, just expanding a little bit more. The readiness. So sometimes you'll fail for OBD2 because it'll say your vehicle's not ready. Okay, what does that mean? That means the vehicle's computer has not had a chance to check all of the systems that it's trying to check. And there's a couple reasons why that happens. One is if your battery dies and you jump start it, that means your vehicle and its computer wants you to go through one full drive cycle. And unfortunately, every vehicle manufacturer has a different drive cycle. For one, it may be drive it 20 miles. For another one, it may be 100 miles. But once your vehicle goes through a drive cycle and this computer resets, usually either you'll see that light go off, or what will happen is you'll go to your mechanic, you'll say, hey, you failed because of OBD2. What I need you to do is drive your vehicle around for a couple of days, make sure you get at least, usually they suggest, anywhere between 20 and 100 miles, right? Drive it around, come back, we'll plug back in, and then they're able to actually clear that code and pass you for inspection. They do have the option at inspection station to let you do that and then come back and finish the inspection. But that's usually inspection station dependent. You want to go to the next one? So these are just the handouts that I think went around. Probably don't need to go over them much, but this is just some of the public outreach that we've done. These were placed initially in every inspection station, gets a few of these if they want to look over themselves or pass them out to consumers if they're having an issue. Go ahead to the next slide. So going back to the emissions issue, because if something is wrong with somebody's emission system, it's probably going to be an expensive fix. So Vermont law actually requires that the entire emission control system be warranted for a minimum of 3 years or 50,000 miles and up to 15 years, 150,000. Some are different. The big thing that we talk about with emissions is, okay, why is that a big deal? Well, if my spark plug is not firing properly, right? I'm going to get a code that check engine light probably going to come on. A spark plug may cost anywhere from, if you do it yourself and you buy like a halfway decent spark plug, it could be $50. It could be $100. But having someone else do it, it could be a little bit more. But the reason you want to fix that is if you don't fix that and it's firing incorrectly, eventually it could destroy your catalytic converter, other parts of your computer system, which are going to be much more pricey repairs. So part of going back to why we do yearly inspections is that we're going to find that spark plug that's misfiring during that yearly inspection. And hopefully we're going to get it fixed prior to that catalytic converter going bad, because catalytic converter are going to be, over $1,000, maybe a couple $1,000. So again, the Vermont law requires it, but then also we just want to make sure that people aren't, again, that affordability standpoint, we want to make sure that people are getting stuff fixed prior to it being a bigger problem. you go to the next slide. So we do have in Vermont, which a lot of people may not know about, a time extension waiver. This is something where the vehicle has passed the safety portion of the test, but there's some type of failure for emissions. It lays out very clearly that it has to have passed the safety inspection portion. So if you have bad brakes, you get no time waiver. This is only for that OBD2 emission system, okay? If the mechanic says it was not tampered with or removed, the emissions system, if the repair is not covered under warranty, so if it's covered under warranty, we're gonna say, hey, before we inspect it, bring it over to the dealer, it's covered under warranty, fix it, bring it back, get an inspection. The diagnosis and the repair estimate must be more than $200. And the vehicle did not receive a waiver a year ago as part of their last inspection. So basically what this does is, again, talking on an affordability standpoint, we know that some of these things, like if you were told all of a sudden you need a new computer for your vehicle, I mean, that just sounds expensive to me. I can't give exact prices, but we're talking thousands of dollars. If you need, something else that's going to cost $1,000, what we thought was, okay, emissions control is not necessarily a safety issue right now. We could give a time extension waiver for 1 year. That gives that person time to save up, get that thing passed, and then next year they need to have that repair done before they get their next inspection. But they will be issued a valid sticker for this year. So it'll give them a 1 year, hey, you now know you have a $2,000 repair that needs to be done by this time next year. Start saving up and get it passed. If they come back the next year and it's not fixed, you can't get another waiver for time, is all this says. Again, another thing that mechanics should be telling people that are having these issues. So hopefully that is getting out there. There is also, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of like Good News Garage, the Reach Up program. They actually have programs designed specifically just for emissions repair for people in Vermont that need that assistance. So there is options for people other than just you have to save, We'll go to the next slide.
So just on your comment about Good News Garage, so is it the mechanic's responsibility to share that information with people who may need financial assistance getting that done?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I don't like necessarily putting responsibility on anybody. I'd like to say that as a good business partner with the state of Vermont, they should be helping their consumers and customers and giving them those avenues. We don't have anything right now that says like, hey, if someone comes in and, they get the time extension waiver and they can't finish it up, please refer them to Good News Garage or Reach Out. I mean, that's more like, hopefully people know about, 411, they can call and ask a question there or, go online, and it could be very difficult. It's probably something that's not well advertised, to be honest with you. But something that we could also look into.
The Department of Environmental.
Yeah.
Vehicle emission. Well, and that is something.
So talking about a little bit about the AVIP technology we have. So there were a few things built into the system that would help us with some of the issues we're having. So one of the issues we were having initially with the OBD2 was that it's not required on vehicles that are over 8,500 pounds. So what mechanics were doing is they were just putting in the wrong weight for the vehicle, and so they could bypass the OBD2. The good thing about AVIP is now you're actually plugging something into the vehicle's diagnostic system, and it's telling you, all the stats of that vehicle, and it's telling you if it needs to go through OBD2 or not. So people are not able to bypass that, because we were seeing, and which bounces into the other one is, okay, but what if they just plug into a different vehicle? And that's why AVIP started this thing, what we call the EVIN list. So every week, there's a list sent out to every inspector, and back in those 7 regions, every inspector gets a list from their region of every vehicle that was inspected in their region that had an even mismatch is what we call it. So that means that the VIN that was entered into the tablet by the mechanic, and you can either manually enter it or you can scan. There's actually a barcode inside most doors of vehicles. You can scan that. If that VIN doesn't match the VIN that the computer says it should be, it sends the investigator an email saying, hey, this station, this mechanic, this date, this time, they, punched in this VIN, but the system at least is telling me it's this VIN. So we will investigate those every week. Is there legitimate reasons for that? Yes. You could have had your computer replaced, like a lot of older cars or a car that might have a salvage title may have needed to get that replaced. And there is a way to get your computer diagnostics back to match. It's, from what I understand, a pretty expensive and difficult task. So a lot of times people will plug in, it'll say, like, let's say it's a Subaru, and it'll say it's, a 2019 Subaru, but the VINs don't match. It's like, well, maybe that car was totaled in a crash. They got, a parts car and took those cars. So it could be legitimate. A lot of it is, people manually entering a 17-digit VIN and just putting in the wrong numbers. And that's just quick and easy. Like an inspector either is in the area, will stop by and say hi and talk to them about it, or they'll call them and say, hey, I see you had this. I can tell because we can use the AVIP portal and see how many times each of those vehicles have been inspected. I can tell that this person just put, an S instead of a Z, or a lot of like zeros instead of O's. So there's no O's in VINs, but not everybody knows that, right? So because there's zeros, so no VINs have O's, because how would you ever differentiate between the two? So a lot of them is little stuff like that. But some of those even investigations have led to larger things, like, someone that is actually plugging into a different car, right? Like I have a 2019 Subaru here, 2019 Subaru here. This one I know is going to fail. This one I know is going to pass. Do the full inspection on this one and then just plug into this one. And it used to be much more common before we had this tablet, because you just get one good car at the shop and every car that comes in, you plug in, boom, 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 good to go. So it's low, I would say. When we first started this, like there's a note on there, one station had 300 even mismatches, just that one station. I would say now, there's usually per area, there's probably 1 to, I don't even want to say 10, to be honest with you. 10 would be a lot in a week. I would say 1 to 5-ish per week per inspector. Half of those are usually either, Toyota has some weird thing where theirs won't always come up properly. So you're just saying, this is just, Toyota's computers do this, pass it on. And then another quarter to the other half of them are probably just mistypes. We do still investigate each one of them because we have gone out and found other things through this even investigation. Like I said, people do still try to plug into other vehicles, or, what they can to try and get a sticker and then put that sticker on a vehicle that probably shouldn't have a sticker. So we do investigate them all, but this technology has really improved the way that we're able to make sure that the car that's actually being inspected is actually being inspected rather than something else, which is a great tool. Let's see. All right, can you go to the next slide? So some of the things that we've identified as reasons why we believe an annual vehicle inspection program is needed, right? Is obviously safer roads, like I talked about earlier. I personally want to be safe in my car, and I also want to make sure that other people are safe in their cars as well, because as we're driving down the road, there's plenty of other distractions, right? There's things going on. We know, cell phone use, we know, road conditions and the snow. If we can at least say that the cars are properly equipped, we're checking one box off of that, highway safety list that we have, that we know these cars are safe. We do. Oh, sorry.
What actual, that feeling, I guess, that we know that they've been with, is there any data, metrics, anything that you can point to that says, since we've gone to this system, or since it's been implemented, or with safety inspections, is there anything in Vermont, in your area, that would demonstrate that, other than our, other than what you had said? I appreciate what you're saying, and there is confidence in knowing that every vehicle at least should have been inspected. We'll get into that data that says whether they are or are not, but do we have any metrics that you point to or look at, or that the that your groups, can back that up in some way. I get asked that a lot. I'd
Yeah.
love to have something that would
So
support that more
Yeah.
than,
the metrics would be great, and maybe Kevin Davis is gonna say something, but I will say, if you've ever driven around in other states that don't have vehicle inspections, and you drive down the road for a little bit, the metric of just driving by these vehicles that are like, how did it even get from point A to point B today is pretty astronomical. We don't see a ton of those in Vermont, but yeah, maybe the captain has something.
The state of Texas did a significant study on this a few years back. The reason being is cops, when they show up to a crash, right? We're looking at behavioral issues because that's what we can do. Did the person run a stop sign? Were they speeding? Were they intoxicated? Et cetera. But they're not crawling underneath the car and inspecting the brakes. They're not taking a look at the tires. They're not checking to see if the windshield wipers are working, raining. They're not doing any of that. So that data is not collected. So everything's pretty much anecdotal. But if I was using anecdotal conversation, let's use the behavioral aspects. One car is speeding down the road, another one's coming to an intersection and he's distracted because he's on his cell phone, doesn't see the stop sign, pulls out in front of the speeding car. You want that car to stop at 100 feet or 125 feet? Right, to avoid that crash. Do we have a measurement for that? Probably not. But the state of Texas did a comprehensive study, looking at different aspects of the safety. But common sense tells us all that if the vehicle's windshield wipers are working and they saw that vehicle on the stop sign, they get a better chance of stopping. If the brakes are working properly and they need to stop within 100 feet, and it actually stops within 100 feet and avoids the crash. If the tires were involved when it's wet and the car didn't hydroplane and hit the car that just pulled out in front of them. I mean, you can go through that whole list of safety aspects, but is there a way to capture that data? Not unless troopers start crawling underneath cars as inspection mechanics and go through them to find out what's the cause of the crash. In most cases, or some cases, it could be a contributing factor like distracted driving or speeding or DUI or other behavioral aspects. But the closest thing to a study that I've seen is from the state of Texas.
well, I appreciate that. And I would say that it's pretty hard to measure things that didn't happen. So if accidents were avoided and safety helped, it's pretty hard to measure what was avoided.
Right.
But there are a significant amount of members in this body that and propose every year or every biennium, maybe both, that we should significantly loosen our inspection rules and that we should even consider doing away with them. That crash data, they say, is inconclusive on whether it does or doesn't help. And I really want to make sure that if there's more to say about it, I would like to make sure we get a chance to really speak to that, and whether it be now or at a point. But that's part of the reason we're going through as in depth as we are, because this is my limited time in the committee. This is one that you regularly get hit with. And so that's why I'm questioning the piece, and I appreciate your feedback. If you have more to speak on it, I'd like to hear.
What we have up here, explains it quite a bit. I mean, it's obviously safe for roads. We just gave examples of that. But it's also cost savings. So it shows you a half-inch cumulative for us. Let's say you did inspections every 2 years. If I didn't catch that, you're gonna come back with 1.5 inches cumulative for us, so the brakes are gonna be even worse. If you go in and you fail because of a CV boot, and a CV boot costs $10 to fix, but you didn't fix it and you let sand and dirt get in, now you have to replace your ball joints. And then if you don't replace the ball joints because you haven't gone in and got the car inspected, now you're sideways in a ditch going 50 miles an hour with your car totaled because you lost your front end, and that's a really expensive fix. So it's like going to the doctor. We don't go to the doctor every 10 years, right? You want to catch something early so that you could actually be able to fix it, and be able to get better, and to be able to get healthy again. Car is very similar. Going in for regular inspections is actually cost savings. Even if there wasn't an inspection program and I had a car, I'm going to drive the thing into my mechanic and say, go through it. Absolutely. Because any one of you have a lift at your home? Probably not. Do you put the car up on the lift and take a look, see if it's safe? I mean, and if you did have a lift at your home and you put it up, check to see if the car is safe, do you know what you're looking at?
I bet if you own a lift, then you probably do. I agree that I hire a mechanic for that, but if you're into cars that much that you have a lift, but I get your coaching.
The point of it is I personally, I have 2 daughters that are driving. I gotta tell you, I want them in a safe car. I am gonna
take them to my mechanic, whether there's an inspection program or not. I'm gonna have them put it up on the lift. I'm gonna have them go through it on a regular basis. Just like I make my doctor's appointment every year, make sure that I'm healthy, I want my car healthy. And we're not talking about, you know, gee whiz, maybe a windshield wiper squeaking or something like that. We're talking about saving lives, right? We're talking about serious, I mean, somebody's driving down the road. How many of you know what 4 30 seconds of a tire tread is? Right? Most of you don't go out looking at your cars, to determine if they're 4 30 seconds or 2 30 seconds. But you know what the difference is? Hydroplaning, stopping, gripping the road. It's a significant difference, and that can be the difference between life and death. It can be the difference between crashing and not crashing. Most of us aren't inspection mechanics like Nick and I are. Most of us don't have that knowledge.
Do you have a breakdown of inspections that are done yearly? How many things are, like a percentage?
The failure items.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
for safety, like,
Yeah.
I guess that would sort of get at it, does, speculation on prevents crashes, but you can say, all right, we found X amount of safety issues on a yearly
Yeah.
basis, was it 20, 25?
We print the sheets. I just did it for Cam Smith, WC Exit Story.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is I thought that the top 5 would be the same every year, and they weren't. Brakes are generally up there, right? There's more people.
Not what you catch, but like how many safety, like if you've done like 1,000, or like 20% of those failed for safety issues.
Oh, about 3% on average over the last 5 years.
So you're talking about
3.5.
3%. So that's, I guess that doesn't help.
But that's a hard number to look
I
at.
was
This is,
curious to go into that.
Yeah.
this is where statistics worry me, right?
Yeah.
Because personally, I got a cracked windshield. Tomorrow, I'm dropping my car off at Portland Glass. I'm getting it fixed because I know next month I got to get my car inspected, right? That's not going to show up on the inspection report, right? You got bald tires and you replace your tires. You're going to do it before you go in and get inspected. Why get your car inspected if you know you're going to fail it? So a lot of people will make repairs before they go in. Or the station, you'll drive in and the mechanic will go, oh, you need to do that. They'll fix it and then inspect the car. So,
That's what I
but 3%, probably 3.5% have been about the average of the last 5 years for failures per se.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to get mechanics more on board for if the vehicle fails, fail the vehicle, then fix the item, so we have a record of the failure, right? Because if something happens to that car later on, it's nice to know, but like the captain said, a lot of times you pull in with your headlight out, they're gonna be like, hey, by the way, I got to fail your car, and they're allowed to charge them for the failure, not saying they all do. I could just fix the headlight real quick for $50. Would you rather I do that? Yes. And so then we're not getting notice of that failure. Unfortunately. But that would just be like if you changed it at home before you went to the inspection, we would never know you drove around for the last 11.5 months without the headlight. So there's that.
Representative Casey?
Some inspection stations, especially if it's a friend of yours,
Mhm.
will say, hey, Jim, that's not gonna pass.
Mhm.
If I go through and it's gonna put you down as a failure, you want that? And it's like, oh, let me go fix that. I didn't, but and I do the same thing with my motorcycle. I know a little bit more about motorcycles, so I go around and check everything out before I go do my inspection. So those figures wouldn't really be accurate,
It's like the traffic warning.
depending upon how friendly your mechanic is.
And again, we don't want to get rid of that either, right? Because that makes more of a free market so like, you don't have to get it fixed at that mechanic. If that mechanic's gonna charge you more than you think, we want you to be able to go somewhere else and get another quote and say, hey, that guy told me 1,500 for brakes, I'll do it for 1,000, right? Again, that affordability standpoint, if we just say, along those lines, that just made me think of that. We want to keep that market open so that people can go other places.
Sure.
Yeah, you didn't want to jump ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
I definitely have a few more in that
Okay.
area, but you mentioned about driving different parts of the country. I happen to have spent a significant amount of time in the South recently, and they do not have inspection laws. The amount of abandoned cars on the side of the road that are banned, they have their theft issues, but the amount of that do not work or they're broken down is dramatically different than up here in the Northeast. It is dramatically different. Is it possible that's part of the argument in looking at the amount of abandoned vehicles compared to population, because that's a significant contributing, but I will tell you that as somebody who has done this a lot recently, you see a car on the side of the road here abandoned, it's rare.
Mhm.
And if you drive in particular southern states, you couldn't make a trip without seeing an abandoned vehicle in a couple of these southern states that I mentioned before. Perhaps one of the things that would help the argument of the people that are pushing against relieving, loosening these programs is the amount of abandoned vehicles, the amount of people that are there. We don't have a significant problem of it here in Vermont.
Right.
This would be a contributing, potentially.
Yeah.
Contributing factor, but that is a huge
Yeah.
point that you had mentioned in there.
Yeah.
That I've seen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, down there, you could pay $100 for a car and drive it around till it dies, then you just spent $100 on a car, just leave it on the side of the road, what do you care, right?
It happens every
Yeah,
day.
whereas here, we luckily don't have those cars on the road as often. I mean, you still see them some, but that's a great point.
There are many members watching our testimony today, and this is for their benefit as well. Did you have another comment there? I'm sorry. Oh, thank you.
So just to finish on that the reasons for it, cost savings, obviously, we've talked a lot today about detecting the small thing, and that avoids those big things down the road. And then just improves your vehicle performance. Everybody's worried about paying for gas. If your car is not operating how it's supposed to with good tires, emissions, your gas mileage will be affected. And then obviously it comes in for recall notifications. If you want to skip, then I'll see if we should stop or not. You can skip that one. We talked about the total abstinence program earlier. Was there any other questions? I can touch on it again quick, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Like I said, we're doing about 1,000 people right now are in this program. We monitor them as violations come in.
We spent a significant amount of time
Okay.
on this in the last
Go
couple of
ahead.
years, so I'm okay with
Okay,
skipping.
go ahead, skip that one. I do want to touch on the education portion that we're doing right now. It's been amazing. We go to 4 technical schools right now. What they do is they'll do their whole coursework, and then at the end, we'll actually go up there and run them through an actual vehicle inspection. And at the end, they do all their tests. We'll sign off on them. They'll actually become inspection mechanics in Vermont. So from leaving that school, they could go to a shop and get hired at a shop. So yeah.
That's Fred Webster. He taught me how to drive. Guy on the second floor.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
The guy with the mustache, tie.
the guy holding a air cleaner.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See you up there?
Fred Webster.
Oh, wow.
No, it's a little.
I was gonna make a joke about the cat.
That's like 1968.
So that's the pictures like, you like that.
Yeah.
But we've had amazing feedback. We just did one of these in March up in the Northeast Kingdom. Amazing feedback from the teachers. They love having us there. And it's been great.
How many of you graduate?
Oh, man, I don't know. Probably each time we do it, we probably do it 2 times to 3 times a year. And there's probably always between 10 and 15 people. So I'd say, 40 or 50 people a year, probably for the last however many years it's been going. Yeah. So it's been great. If you want to skip ahead. I'll just touch on a couple of the cases that we've dealt with over the years. And again, this is all stuff that has to be handled by our criminal investigator. So when we're looking at those 7 regions, again, there's only 6 actually certified law enforcement officers that are dealing with these cases. So anything from DLS cases to even a manslaughter case. If you remember the Jalbert case, I believe it might have been Barry, but that was where an inspection mechanic actually passed a vehicle with bad brakes. That person came down the hill, brakes went out. They went across an intersection and hit somebody and actually killed the operator of another vehicle. I think this person obviously was fine because they got charged. That was a case that Vermont DMV helped investigate. We recently just got the final disposition on a wire fraud, bank fraud that we actually ran through the federal system up in Burlington. It was identity theft, a Vermont victim in debt for almost $200,000. Then we also had an owner GM of a Northeast Kingdom dealership that recently pled guilty to embezzlement, multiple counts of vehicle forging papers. These are things that we see a lot, and we haven't touched a lot on it today, but any paperwork that comes into DMV, there is laws that says it must be accurate, to mailing addresses, to physical addresses, to what vehicles on there, who the people are. We're investigating these daily because there's so much coming into DMV, either in person at all our branch locations, through the mail. We're dealing with a lot of people from out of state that are trying to register in the state using fraudulent addresses in Vermont. We're chasing down all these places all over Vermont to make sure people are not actually living there. Because what people do is they'll buy damaged vehicles in other states. Some states won't allow you to register a salvage vehicle unless you actually get inspected by a DMV officer. So what they'll do is they'll figure out a way to fake their address up here in Vermont, register all these vehicles up in Vermont, and then sell them in Florida and stuff. And now these cars are leaving lots in Florida with Vermont plates on them because, you know, it got through the system. We closed that loophole recently, but we're dealing with a lot of issues of this backlog of people from out of state doing this. And then just a couple other things that have been going on. We did help with Vermont State Police to investigate one of their own, resulting in a trooper actually being charged, and he was actually false swearing on documents, on DMV documents. So one of our current investigators did that case. And then I'll just hit the last, I think there's one more slide left. Some of our personal highlights outside of cases. So provided 700 requests for assist from other agencies, this state, other state, just in the last year. So, I mean, that's as much as, you know, going out to crashes with people, executing search warrants with people. Like I said, the partial plates. I'll tell a real quick story. I told the director I was going to tell it real quick is I was involved in one in Burlington, Vermont, had a shooting. Someone got out of a car and just started shooting at the car behind them. And all they had was a quick video running across like the side of a building of a car. I was able to decipher which type of car it was, not a normal car by any means, one that's discontinued, I think. Able to look that up in the DMV system, say red, it was actually a Chevy Impalas, you know, registered between this age and this age of the car. Looked it up. This happened in Burlington. I looked up the ones that are registered to people in Burlington, trying to get lucky. There was two in Burlington. We went to the first one and someone walks in the back parking lot and there's a red Chevy Impala with a bunch of bullet holes in it. So we actually ended up helping the Burlington police in that. And it's just a good, yeah, I mean, that's the investigative work where you're kind of like, you're throwing darts at the wall and seeing what sticks, but it's stuff that we can do and we can help other agencies. We help a lot of agencies with stuff like this. Like I probably get a call 3-4 times a week on retail thefts, Heinsberg police, you know, the guy that crashed through Kenny Drugs, right? Like they're calling me on that. Like, can you look up all the white pickup trucks and stuff like that? So we're doing a lot more than just regulating inspection stations and just trying to push that out. Cause like we talked about earlier, we are all certified level 3 law enforcement officers that came from, you know, places beforehand where we're doing all normal, you know, we were doing patrol and now we're kind of in this investigative role. Again, like we talked about earlier, the Chittenden County Gun Violence Task Force. I'm actually sworn in as a full-time TFO for them. It was something I did before I came to DMV. So it's part of my like, hey, I'd like to continue doing this. And they helped me with that, you know, career growth to stay on that team, be able to help Vermont, and part of the governor's thing of keeping Vermont safe and cutting down on gun violence. So it's been great. And like we talked about earlier, the canine program that we're starting to, you know, build up. So we're going to have a couple drug dogs. My dog is actually going to be trained in firearms detection and some other stuff like that. So helping with the ATF, but also we're getting requests to help with outbound truck traffic going from, you know, Massachusetts to Vermont to Canada. And they really want to stop drugs and guns from going to those places. So if we can help with our commercial enforcement and stop some of that, I mean, I think it's best for the overall public. So we're doing stuff. I know we spent most of our time talking about inspection stations, but just to let you guys know, we're doing much more than that. And that's why, you know, with the 7 to 9 people we have working those areas, like we're all out right now. So like the director said, he'll always take more people. So, but yeah, sorry.
Representative White?
Question, so we talked a lot about inspections, so my question is, are you all keeping tabs on or hearing feedback from consumers regarding dealerships? And I'm just thinking of 2 instances in my own experience of having tires changed and put on without the lug nuts secure and leaving the dealership and, you know, coming close to having a wheel fall off. And that's happened twice in Vermont. It's a pretty significant safety issue, particularly when you have young children in the back seat. So So, when that happened to me at the time, I went back to the dealers, had a pretty unsuccessful,
Yeah.
but does your, group
Yes.
take on?
So we field those complaints a lot. I will say the investigative side with inspection, so all of our administrative penalties right now are based on items for inspection, right? So there's nothing in the inspection manual that says, make sure their lug nuts are tight. So we can't enforce that on that end. It's really more of a civil instance where like, that's, if you choose to do business with them again, right? Like we try to tell consumers like there's places out there, if they're not giving you good business, go to the ABIP portal, find somewhere else. We do usually, just because, we're all law enforcement officers and we know that not every call is going to be something that we directly always deal with, is we usually call and say, hey, we had a complaint. What's your guys' process like? Because it could have been during inspection, they had to take a wheel off, right, to inspect the brakes. And when they put it back on, they didn't do it properly. So we would definitely, if you called me and said that, I'm definitely calling that place and making that known to them. It's just that.
Is that the correct process for a consumer?
I mean, personally, I would say, since it doesn't necessarily have to do with inspection, or if it didn't have to do with inspection, I would say we're not necessarily the best spot. Maybe the dealer's unit a little bit because they're regulating the dealerships,
But
but also,
underneath the DMV?
yeah, but also like that could also go to the consumer assistance program through the Attorney General's office. Like, hey, I want to make a complaint against this
Yeah.
dealership, right? Like, this is what happened to me. And then they track those where like, and we always tell people like, I'll call them and I'll try to get them to fix their process. But if you so choose, you could also make a complaint through this CAP program through the Attorney General's. And then they do track those. If they get a certain amount of complaints, right, they're going to start going to that dealership, or they may call you and say, hey, do you want to go mediate this problem? How can they make it right? And so I will say, if you call us, we're definitely going to deal with it, but it's not necessarily something.
But Attorney General is probably the better.
Probably,
avenue.
I would say, yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? First, I want to really apologize for the delay in the middle of the presentation. I apologize for making a little bit of rush at the end. That was an unexpected event. So we really appreciate all the effort and the time to make the committee almost experts on ready for a job.
I'll be your mechanics license.
Much better spot to answer all of the concerns that we hear from our fellow members and our constituents. So we really appreciate all the time and effort. We also, I guess, all have people that we feel like we can go to now
Yes.
when the questions come up.
Yes.
And appreciate all the flexibility on the schedule and coming in on all the information and all the handouts and all the pieces. So that was a valuable morning, and I thank you all three of you very much. And